So in the last episode, we learned how to set up our controller resources, which were the different controller methods we were going to use in order to create a CRUD system for this particular posting system. So you are kind of getting into learning how to create a CRUD system, which a lot of people have been asking for. So what we're going to do today is we are going to be setting up our view files inside our website. So basically, the visual stuff that you see when you actually click on the different pages and you want to create a post or see post or something, because that is important. Otherwise, there's no point to making a website if you can't actually see what we're making here. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to start taking a look at what we have already when it comes to the view files, because in the last episode, we created a couple of different files and we put them inside a post folder, inside our views folder. To just kind of organize the files that we have inside our project here, because it makes sense when you start creating a large website that all the files are not in the same place. Right now we have a create.blade.php, we have a edit.blade.php, and we have a index.blade.php file when it comes to the posting system we just created. Now the index file is going to be the main page for this particular posting system, and you can do whatever you want inside this page, whether it just being a welcome message or actually showing all the different posts inside this page. You can customize this in any kind of way. But what we decided to do in the last episode was to pass all the different posts from inside our database to this particular page, so we could actually show it inside this post section inside the website. Now, we do also want to have a couple of buttons that we can click inside this page here that is going to take you to either create a new post, which is going to be the create.blade file, or we can go in and edit a certain post, which has already been created, which is going to take the user to the edit.blade file. And then we're going to have a button for, of course, deleting the post as well. So if you have all the posts listed below each other, then there should be a delete button you can click and then delete the post. So that is going to be what we're setting up in this episode here. So what we're going to do is we're going to start inside the index.blade.php file, because right now, from what we have in the previous episode, we just set a basic HTML5 setup where you can go in and then just, have a title, for example, all posts. This could also be an H2 or H3. Actually, we should probably do proper convention here. Let's just make this into an H2. So we actually have a title. And if I were to actually go inside my browser here, you can actually see that we right now, if I were to go up inside my URL, which is right now just empty, there's nothing really going on here. So if I were to say /posts, and then click enter, you can see that we have all posts. I'm just going to zoom in so you can actually see it. And then we're going to have all the posts listed below here. That is basically what we're going to set up inside this page here. So if I were to go back inside my text editor and go below my H2 element, we can actually loop out all the different posts that we have inside this particular posting system. And the simple way we're going to be doing that is by going in and creating a for each loop. And because this is a Blade file, we have the Blade way we can do things. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy and then paste it in so you can actually see it. And then you can see we can just simply create a for each loop using the Blade template by referencing to @ for each, parentheses, and then say posts as post. And that is a basic for each loop where you take an array and you just kind of loop out all the data inside the array. Now, where do we get the data from? Well, we actually pass that to this particular page using our controller. So if we were to go back up and find our controller, you can see we have controller, post controller.php. If I open this one, you can see that when we actually loaded up the index page, we passed in all the data from our database to this particular file. And again, we talked about this in the previous episode that, you basically use our model class, which is called post, that extends to a model class, which is just called model, that then fetches all these different posts that we can use inside our code here. So going back inside our index file, we just basically grab that array called posts, which is passed to this page. And we say that, well, for each loop, we just want to loop out the post title and the post body as an H2 and a paragraph. So maybe we should actually go back up here and say this is going to be an H1 tag, just so it's not the same thing. So doing this, going back inside our website, if we were to refresh here, you can see that we get And I just realized here that we actually haven't created any sort of post inside this website yet. So of course we can't see all the new posts. If we were to go inside the database here and just kind of zoom out so we can see, this is the post table inside our database, and there's nothing here. So once we do get to create some posts, they will actually be displayed inside this page here. But we are going to wait a little bit when it comes to just kind of customizing this, because right now we should also have a delete button. We should probably have just a little bit of HTML to kind of make it a little bit more decent looking than what it is right now. But basically all you need to know here is that when we do actually pass in all the data using that particular post route, then we also pass all the data with it inside this page here, so we can grab it using, for example, a for each loop. So right now we are actually outputting all the posts. We just don't have any posts yet inside our database. So the next thing we're going to do is probably create it so that we can actually create a post. Because otherwise we can't see anything. So the way we're going to do that is we're going to create a link that is going to link to the create method. If I were to go inside here, inside our post controller, you can see that we have a create method that basically just returns a view called create. So this is the create.blade.php file. And the simple way we can just do that is by going right below our h1 tag, going to paste in a anchor tag, and inside the anchor tag here we're actually pointing to a route which is called posts.create. And this part I do need to explain a little bit because you may be thinking that we're pointing to a folder called posts and then we're referencing to the create file inside this particular folder here. But that is actually not what is happening. If I were to go down inside our routes folder, inside our project folder here, and open up the web.php file, you'll actually notice that we created a route that points to a resource. And we gave this route a name, which is called posts. This means that when we reference to a route inside a view file, by saying route, just like we did inside our index file here, route, parentheses, and then the name of the route, we actually reference to this particular line of code because this is where we actually created a route called posts. So when we say posts dot something, we're actually referencing to a method inside this particular posts route. And what does this particular route point to? It points to a resource, which is actually this entire post controller class that has all these different methods inside of it. That is what we set up inside this particular web.php file. Okay, so by using post.something, we can reference to all the different methods we created in the previous episode. So we're not pointing to a folder called post and then a file inside that folder there. We're actually pointing to a particular method inside our posts route that we set up. I felt like I just said the same thing like 4 times in a row. I just want to make sure that people understand what is going on inside the code here. So when we call upon this method, which is called create, we're basically just going up and saying, okay, just return a particular page, which is called post.create. And here we're not pointing to a route, but we're pointing to a view, which means that now we're actually going inside our files here and returning a post. So we're going inside the post folder, which is down here. And then we're going in and returning a file called create.blade.php. Okay, there's a key difference there between route parentheses and view parentheses, and then this exact same line of code. Okay, just to make sure people don't get confused there. So what we're going to do is inside our create file, we're going to set up a form so you can actually create a new post inside this website here. So I'm going to open up my create.blade.php file. I'm just going to set up a basic HTML5 setup, just like we did before. I'm going to create a h1 tag called something like create post. And below here, I will create a form, which is going to create our new post for inside this particular website here. So I'm going to just copy paste a form that I have here and just kind of explain what is going on. So we're creating a form, and inside this form we use a post method because that is just kind of what you do when you create a post route, right? So we have a post route here, and the action is again not pointing to a particular file, but pointing to a route which is called posts. Okay, so now we know we're pointing to this particular line of code inside our web.php file, because this one we call posts, and this one have access to all the different, again, methods inside the post controller, which means that when I say I want to access the store method, I'm now going inside the post controller. I'm going down to the store method and saying that I want to grab some data and I want to validate it, because that is built into Laravel, which is really neat. And I just want to make sure that these two fields here has actually been submitted. Like, these has to be submitted. And then I want to run a post model method, which is called create, which again exists inside the model class, not the post class. And I'm just simply going to pass in my data and then validate it and submit it inside the database and actually create an entry. And if that is successful, then I return to another page, which is called index, which again is the main page for all our post, so to speak, inside this posting system here. I'm just going to wrap this down to 2 lines just so it actually fits inside my screen here. So going back inside our create.blade.php file, below inside the form, we're running something called a CSRF. This is cross-site request forgery. That is what it stands for. And this is a built-in thing inside Laravel that basically goes in and prevents cross-site request forgery, which is very important security to have inside your website when you deal with forms that users can submit things in, or just basic forms that is viewable inside the website, not necessarily something that the user has access to, like, by typing into a form. Like, this is something you need inside any kind of form. Basic security, so to speak. So inside this form, I'm going to add a label, which is just a regular HTML label that says title. And then you can type in a piece of text, which is a type of text that has a name set to title, which is the one that we reference right here inside our post controller class method. And we basically just add a value. So in this case here, we just say old title. Essentially it goes in, and if you submit the form and it fails because something, let's say you get an error message or something, instead of deleting all the text that you wrote inside the form when it goes back with the error message, it will actually keep the data inside the actual form. So if I type, for example, in my title for this post here, but I did not submit anything inside my body, inside the message below, and I try to submit the form, it's not going to delete the title inside my form when it returns me back with the error message. So that's basically what this part is doing. So this one doesn't do anything unless we actually fail to submit it properly, so to speak. Below here, we also have the body or the message of the post, which is just inside, again, a text area. And this one is going to be inside a text area that we call body, which again, we reference inside our post controller here, which is down here. And inside the body, we again just use the exact same method here. We return the text if something happens, if there was any kind of error message. And then we have a save button for saving the post, or we could call it submit, or whatever you might want to call it. With this, we now basically just have everything that we need to have inside our create post page. So if I were to save this one and go back inside my website, refresh my create page, then you can see we get some actual data or some actual code that we can run. So we can type in a title and a body. So you would say, this is my first post. And then I can go inside and write something inside the body. I'm just going to say, hey there, this is some text. And I should probably make this big just so we don't have any OCD people because it's small. So if I save this one, then you can see that we get redirected back to our post page. So just, the name of our website /post, because we decided to redirect our user. And now inside the post page, we now have our first post, and it's actually showing inside our post page because that's what we did. If I create a new post again, we again go back inside post /create. Then I can say my second post. And then I can just say some random gibberish just to have something in there. I click save and then return back. And then you can see we have our second post. Now, if I were to click create new post and I don't fill anything inside the title here and I click save, it's going to return me back to the same page, but all the text in here is going to stay because I added in the old body function code inside our text area here. So that is what that particular thing did. Like, it didn't just erase everything we typed in. So this is all we need to do inside the create post page. And I know it doesn't look pretty, but again, this is not an HTML and CSS tutorial. So we're just going to focus on the PHP for now, just some basic HTML, right? Now, there's one last thing I want to do in here is in case of any errors, because remember, we did return back in case that, we did have any sort of error messages. So I'm going to go below the form here, and I'm going to run a if condition using, again, the Blade template layout or the functionality that it comes with. And I just basically say if there are any errors, and I point to a method called any. So if there's any errors, then I basically just want to list them here inside a unordered list where I loop out errors, and I point to all as error, which is a basic for each loop for basically looping out an array. So if there's an array of errors, then create them inside a bunch of lists, basically. So this is basically just going to show any sort of error messages. So if I were to go back inside my website, and again, I try to submit this, then you can see when we have submitted it, it says the title field is required. So we do get a error message. And that, again, it's all built into Laravel, which is so amazing. We just get the error message and we display it. So going back inside our index page, let's actually go ahead and do something to our for each loop here, because this one doesn't look very pretty. Like, this is pretty bare bone. We don't have a delete button. We don't have a way to, for example, again, show certain errors or success messages or something. So what I want to do here is I'm just going to rewrite this for each loop a little bit, and I'm just going to paste in what I have inside my notes here and explain what is going on. So this for each loop is going to look like this instead. Basically, we're doing the exact same thing. We create a for each loop, but this time I'm going to create a div container inside my for each loop that you can style if you want to, using CSS to kind of like create a box around your post or something. Then we want to have the basic title and the body of the post, but I'm also going to add in a anchor tag, which is going to reference to a route that we have inside our post controller here called edit. So when I run this particular link, then I'm going to send my user, or actually let's go ahead and check what is happening here. If I go inside my edit method, if I can find it here, it is going to find a particular post, and it's going to return a view called post.edit. So basically inside our project here, we have our post folder, and we're going to return the edit.blade.php file because this is a view method that we're running here. And we're going to pass in some data, which is going to be this particular post that we're trying to edit. So again, when we run this edit method, it needs to pass in the ID of this post that we're running, or that we want to edit inside our page here. So going back, you can see that my route is pointing to the method, but I'm adding a second parameter, which is going to be the post ID that is actually being grabbed, because again, we're grabbing all the data for each of these posts here when we loop them out. So I can actually pass in the ID for this particular post when I click edit. Now, before we make any changes to this particular edit page, let's actually go and see what is happening below, because I did also add a form that is going to take the user to another route, which is called destroy. Now, the destroy one is doing kind of the same thing as our edit route, because we pass in a parameter, which is the ID of this post. And as you may guess, this is basically just to make sure that we delete this particular post if I decide that I don't want to have it anymore inside my website. So this is just a button for deleting this particular post that we're looping out. Now, inside the form, we just have our cross-site request forgery built in Laravel piece of code here to prevent that, which is something, like I said, you always need to have. And then we just run a particular method called delete. Now, this one, as you can see, I wrote a note here. This one is what you call when you spoof a delete request. Essentially, spoofing is a way for us to go in and say that this particular, this method that we're using for this post here is not going to be a post or get method, but it's going to simulate a delete method. And the reason we need to have this, if you think about it, is because a HTML form has two types of methods. It has a get method and it has a post method. We cannot go inside the method here. If I scroll to the side a little bit, we cannot type delete because that doesn't exist inside HTML or inside PHP. So basically inside Laravel, we can use this particular method here, or this line of code, to say that we want to spoof a delete method, which basically creates a delete method inside our code, which is something you can do with the stuff built into Laravel. So basically, this just basically creates a third type of method we can use. So whenever you want to delete something, add this particular line of code in here to spoof that particular type of method. And then you can go ahead and just add a button that when you click it, it will actually go in and delete this particular post here. Now, I did say that on click, it should return a confirmation that says, do you want to delete this particular post, just to make sure that the user is not accidentally clicking on it. So if we were to actually go back inside my website and refresh my page, you can see that if I were to go back inside our post page, we do actually get a edit button and a delete button. If I click one of these delete buttons, you can see, oh, okay, so we get a do you want to delete this post message? And then I can say, okay, then it's going to delete it. If I say cancel, is not going to delete it. And now you might be thinking, well, we did not set up a delete page yet, like a particular page with the code for deleting it. But actually we did, because if we go back inside our code here, go back inside our post controller, remember we're pointing to a destroy method. If I go inside the post controller, go down to the bottom, you can see we do have a method which is called destroy. We pass in an ID for the particular post that we want to destroy. Then we run a find or fail to actually locate that entry inside the database. And then we run a delete method, which again is built inside our model class. And then basically just redirect the user back to the post front page. And then, we have a success message if that is the case. So if I go back inside our website and actually delete one of these posts and I click OK, you're going to notice that the posts get deleted because it actually worked. So you'll actually notice that we've actually built quite a few features using our post controller class. Like we're basically just setting up the visuals right now. All the backend code is there to be working. Like there's nothing that we need to create other than what we created in the previous episode. Now we're just basically making sure that the user can actually interact with the system. So the last thing we need to do here is just basically set up our edit page for this particular post, so you can actually edit whatever you wrote inside this particular post here. So going back inside our index.blade file, you'll notice that the anchor tag that is the link to our edit page is again just a basic route that takes the user to a particular route method called edit, and it passes in the ID for this particular post. So going back inside our post controller class, just so we know what is going on here, if I go to the edit route, which is right up here, it basically just grabs the data from this particular ID, which is inside the database for this particular ID for this post, and it returns a view called post.edit, which is the edit page inside our files over here, and it passes in the data for this particular post. So going inside our post folder inside our project here and opening up the edit file, you can see again this one is empty. So if I were to actually just create the basic HTML5 setup, we can now start typing in whatever we want to have when it comes to information, like a form where you can edit all the data and such things. So let's start by creating the h1 tag, because we've done that in all the other pages. So we're going to create an h1 that says edit post. Below here, we're going to create a basic form. And now this basic form here is going to do something very similar to the create form that we created. It is going to use a post method. Then it's going to run a action, which is another route, which points to a particular method that we created inside the post controller called update. So it's pointing to another method that basically just submits the data to the database to update that particular post. And this one does also require a parameter so we know which post to actually update, which is the ID for this post here. Now, inside the actual form, we're using a cross-site request forgery token because we need to do that, right? then we also run a method called put. Now, this is similar to the delete one, because remember, we only have post and get methods. We cannot go inside the method here and say update or something inside this database. Now, in this case here, put is actually the name for updating things inside the database. So basically, we're spoofing a update method, which is built into Laravel to allow us to do that. So basically, you know, it's doing a lot of things automatically for us here. It's making our website able to basically update using a method, which is kind of neat here. So inside this form, I added a label called title, which is the title for the post that we have. And I created a input, which is called text, that has a name as title. And inside the title, we can add in the old method to insert some data already inside this particular field here. And we have two parameters. We basically have the title, which basically says that if we did something wrong, you know, we wrote a title, but we left our body empty or something, you know, there's some sort of error happening here. It will then return us back to this page and make sure that what we try to edit is going to still be in there, not get deleted. Now we have a second parameter, which is new. We did not have this one inside our create post one, because this one says, well, okay, but if we did not make an edit yet with this particular title here, then make sure to fill in this instead. So it's going to prioritize this one. If this one does not exist, then do this one instead. And in this case here, it's just going to paste in the old text for the post from inside the database. So when we enter this page for the first time, it will of course choose this one over here because we have not yet edited the actual post and some error happened, right? I hope that makes sense. I think it does. I keep saying that in my videos, but it gets a little bit complex at the end here, right? And for the second one down here, we have another label, which is called body, and we do the exact same thing. We're going to create a text area, and we call this one body. And then we add in the old method, which again has two parameters and is going to prioritize the first one here, which is just basically, again, just exactly the same as this one up here. If I got an error message while editing this post, it's going to prioritize making sure that text is going to go in here first. Now, if there's no text from a edited version, then it's going to prioritize what is already inside the database. And with that, we just need to add one last thing, which we added at the very end of our create.blade one, which is the error message. So if we get any sort of error messages, it's going to show it below the actual form here. You know, if I forgot to fill in any of the fields or something like that. So with that, we're going to save this one, go inside our website and test this one out. So if I refresh it here, you can see, hey there, this is some text. If I actually zoom in so you can see it properly here, that might be a little bit too much. If I click edit, we're going to go to our edit page. And as you can see inside the URL here, we do also have a posts/1/edit. And the reason we get the one inside the URL is actually because it treats this particular link that we created as a post route, because that is what it is, right? So when we create this anchor tag inside our index page for this particular posting system, then inside the route method we created, we added one parameter which said which method to use, and then we added in the parameter for this particular post route. So because it has a parameter, it's going to add that with it inside the URL for this particular route here, and that is why we get the one. So going back inside our edit post page, we can actually go ahead and try to actually edit this. Actually, let's go ahead and delete our text here and just get an error message. So if we were to click update, you can see, oh, okay, so the body field is required. Okay, well, I'm gonna just change it here. And then when I click update, you can see we get taken back to the front page for the posting system, and then the text has actually been updated. So now we do have a working posting system. We can click create new post, we can create something random, and we can save it. Then you can see it gets added in here as a second post. We can edit it or we can delete it. And then we have a basic CRUD system, essentially. So with that, we've actually kind of reached a point now where you know how to create a CRUD system and how to start creating things using PHP inside a website using a Laravel framework. So where should we go from here? We could possibly talk about creating maybe some custom methods inside our controller class. We could talk about some other maybe useful tools that is built into Laravel, like for example, the CSRF token that we have here, the method that basically spoofs a delete method, like, you know, like unique things like that. We could get a little bit more into how to use routes inside a website. You know, I kind of need to think a little bit about where we're going to go from here. I do want to point one more thing out, which is that up until now, we've actually been using XAMPP in order to run this particular website here. But there has been a recent change to Laravel where Laravel basically works better when it comes to using Docker, which is another way to basically set up a server and run websites on your, you know, like using Laravel, so to speak. If you want to do that, you can run any kind of website, but Laravel specifically has gone in and said that they want to work with Docker. So while we have been using XAMPP, there are certain features that will not be allowed using XAMPP. One of those could, for example, be if you want to use Tailwind, which is a CSS framework, in order to go in and, you know, style your website. Well, in order to do that, we actually need to run the website using Docker instead, because we use something called Pale, which is built into Laravel, at least the later versions of Laravel, which require that you use Docker. Otherwise, you're going to get error messages when you try to do certain things using a Laravel website inside our terminal. So maybe the next step from here would be to talk about setting up Docker, so you could actually probably run this using CSS frameworks, other things like that. Maybe you guys have some suggestions there. Maybe you want to learn something else before we get into Docker. I'm more than open to suggestions. So comment inside the comment section for anything that you think would be a good idea for the next step on from here. And I will see you guys next time.